The flight from Denver to San Francisco was already running 40 minutes late. The usual rustle of boarding, the ding of seat belts, and the barely audible safety demonstration played out as Flight 3712 finally lifted off into a crisp blue sky. Among the 142 passengers was 26-year-old Alina Reyes, a travel blogger whose fear of flying was something of a running joke among her followers. Her recent blog post, titled, "Adventure Over Anxiety," had gone viral. Ironically, she had written it on a train. Alina sat in seat 14A, gripping the armrest with one hand, flipping through a well-worn paperback with the other. She'd flown before, many times, but something always felt off about being so far off the ground. Her therapist said it was a control thing. She was just about to close her book when a deep, unnatural boom reverberated through the aircraft. The cabin lights flickered. A suitcase burst from an overhead bin. Then came another sound, this one more chilling, a whining drop followed by silence. The hum of the engines was gone. Passengers stirred. A toddler began to cry. A flight attendant rushed down the aisle, pale and urgent. Moments later, the captain's voice cut through the intercom, calm but strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have lost both engines. Please remain seated and brace for possible impact. We are currently gliding and will attempt an emergency landing." Alina's blood ran cold. She looked out her window. No smoke, no fire, but the wing was dipping slightly, and the landscape below was rising too fast. The plane was gliding, yes, but it was also falling. Her hands trembled as she tried to steady her breathing. The memories started to come back. She wasn't just a blogger with a fear of flying. She was also the daughter of Major Rafael Reyes, a decorated Air Force pilot who had spent hours training her on flight simulators just for fun when she was a kid. It had been their thing. Alina closed her eyes, recalling the feel of the yoke, the terms he drilled into her: angle of attack, V-speed, flare timing. She knew more than most passengers ever would. And she could tell by the pitch and angle of descent, they weren't going to make it over the ridge ahead. The pilots were likely planning to glide toward Reno, but from what she saw, they wouldn't make it that far. Without fully knowing why, she unbuckled her belt and stood. "Miss, you need to sit down." A flight attendant snapped, panic in her voice. "I need to talk to the cockpit," Alina said, voice firm but controlled. "Now, please." There was something in her tone, part command, part calm, that made the attendant hesitate. After a pause, she gave a small nod and escorted Alina forward. In the cockpit, Captain Rowe and First Officer Chen were locked in a tense, hushed exchange. Instruments were failing. Their terrain map showed a dotted descent path over mountains they could no longer clear. Alina took one look and spoke. "You won't make it to Reno. You're losing altitude too fast." Captain Rowe looked up, frowning. "Who are you?" "A trained sim pilot," she said quickly. "My father was Air Force. There's a dry lakebed south of here, Elko Flats. If we divert now, you have enough glide to make it." Chen blinked. "Elko Flats? That's not on our emergency index." "I know, but I've seen it. It's wide and flat. It's our best shot." Rowe hesitated, then handed her the spare headset. "Strap in. Prove it." As the plane banked slowly to the left, the passengers in coach had no idea that the woman from seat 14A was now seated in the cockpit, calculating descent rates and terrain clearance in real time. What they could feel was the sudden shift, not in altitude, but in fate. For the first time since the silence began, the plane had direction. And it wasn't the pilots leading the way. The emergency landing on Elko Flats was rough but survivable. The Boeing 737 skidded across the sunbaked terrain, tires shredding, wings tilted from the uneven surface. Dust engulfed the fuselage. For a few long seconds, everything disappeared into beige chaos, until the aircraft groaned to a final stop, tilted slightly to the right, but miraculously intact. Then came the sobs, the gasps, the disbelieving cheers. Passengers clutched one another, some weeping, others frozen in shock. But all 142 souls were alive. Alina Reyes sat in the co-pilot's seat, her hands trembling, breath shallow. Her knuckles were white from gripping the panel. She looked over at Captain Rowe, who stared back at her with something between awe and disbelief. "You just flew that bird like you were born in the sky," he whispered. Alina shook her head slowly. "I only did what I had to do." "No," he said, voice steady. "You did what no one else could." Minutes later, the emergency exit doors burst open. The inflatable slides deployed. One by one, passengers descended, blinking against the sunlight and coughing through the haze. Fire trucks, ambulances, and highway patrol cars converged on the scene from a nearby interstate. The area had no official runway, just decades-old testing ground once used by the military. Alina finally stepped out last. Still barefoot, still dazed. A firefighter wrapped her in a thermal blanket. "You okay, miss?" She nodded weakly. "You the one who landed this thing?" "I helped," she said quietly. But that wasn't enough to stop the flood. Passengers began rushing toward her, hugging her, crying, thanking her. One woman sobbed into Alina's shoulder, whispering, "You saved my little boy." A man kneeled at her feet. "You brought us home." She didn't know what to say. In her mind, she was still that anxious flyer who double-checked seatbelts 3 times. The irony cut deep, but now, strangers were calling her a hero. News spread like wildfire. By the time she was airlifted to Reno for medical checks, her name was already trending worldwide. Passenger saves plane, civilian flies airliner to safety, and miracle on the flats dominated every major network. Footage from inside the cabin showed her calmly giving instructions beside the pilot, headset on, scanning instruments like a pro. She refused interviews at first. It felt surreal, like it happened to someone else. But the world wasn't letting this one go. The FAA conducted a thorough investigation. Flight 3712's black box confirmed everything. Both engines had failed due to a rare dual compressor stall. The pilots had done everything they could, but it was Alina's course correction that saved them from crashing into the Sierra Ridge. No protocol existed for what happened. She was a civilian who had no official flight training. And yet, her judgment and steady nerves under pressure were as sharp as any trained officer. When the NTSB released their final report, they added an unprecedented footnote. It is the opinion of the board that the actions of civilian passenger Alina Reyes directly prevented catastrophic loss of life. By now, everyone wanted to know her story. She agreed to appear on the Today Show. Dressed modestly, her long brown hair tied back, she sat across from Hoda Kotb and Savannah Guthrie as they played the cockpit footage. "Did you ever imagine yourself in that seat?" Hoda asked. "No," Alina said honestly. "I spent most of my life avoiding it."